Good morning, everyone. In 2015, in the lead up to the 2015 election, Justin Trudeau had very, very positive press. In the United States, in Canada, all across Canada, the press leading up to the 2015 election gave Justin really good coverage. Positive spin on articles, good pictures. It's hard to take a bad picture of Justin Trudeau. But still, carrying on, the press wouldn't have necessarily run with this because there wouldn't have been the interest in running with a cartoon like this. But here's the comic that the Pensacola News Journal printed recently. And I don't know if it's today or the other day, but I'll give you a date in just a minute. And it says, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is wearing brown face again. And it's got Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, presumably. He's got a suit and tie, and he's got a Canadian flag on his lapel. And his head is made of poop, right? So he's a head, right? Right. Here's the comic, and it was released on September 20th. And here's the better version, right? So link is in the description if you want to share that. But I'm not sharing this to make fun of Trudeau, although it seems kind of like I am. But really, I'm noting how starkly different the press is in covering him, from comics to just coverage in general. I've heard some very tough questions coming from reporters recently, even ones talking about, respectfully, sir, that didn't answer the question, when, yeah, he didn't answer the question. One of the questions was, what is the costume you were wearing at this costume party that you were in blackface in? And he said, we've all learned from this, and I've been open with all Canadians. Right, that's the answer to the question. No, it's not. That doesn't address the question at all. So that's very interesting to watch all of that unfold within an image. Right? Because that's what this is, right? This is an indication that there's an appetite for this. People are willing to pay for this. People are willing to run this in their newspapers. Notable, starkly different than 2015, right? Here's a very big election issue, bigger than gun bans, or at least more Canadians want to talk about this than gun bans, in my opinion, from what I've been hearing. And, well, CBC News is reporting soaring rents and house prices in Canadian cities make housing a key election issue. Jeff Gallant lived in his new home just 17 days before the for sale sign went up. Soon after the single dad rented the house, it was sold, and the new owners sent him a notice of major renovation that would force Gallant and his two young children to leave. A similar thing occurred at his previous place, and it's happening to so many renters in Charlottetown that a new term has been born: rent-eviction. Charlottetown is a prime example of the scarce vacancies and spiraling costs facing renters in communities across the country. It's getting ridiculous, Gallant says, of the rental market. Prices have doubled pretty much, and that boils back to supply and demand. They know there's nothing here, so landlords jack up the price. Cost of living is a big election issue. A CBC News commissioned online poll from June suggests, and housing is the biggest single expense for most Canadians, according to Statistics Canada figures on annual household spending. As the campaign has unfolded, the federal parties have begun to unveil plans on how they might make life more affordable for voters. The Liberals aim to build 100,000 affordable housing units over a decade. They would also encourage home ownership through a first-time homebuyer incentive that subsidizes up to 10% of the purchase of a new home and 5% on resale homes, with restrictions. The NDP have a more ambitious plan, committing to build 500,000 affordable housing units in a decade. A central message of the Conservative campaign is that it wants people to, quote, get ahead, not just get by, and that by the government and that the government needs to get its hand out of Canadians' pockets in areas like the carbon tax, which the party describes as ineffective. The Conservatives have promised to ease building regulations to increase the housing supply, and said Monday that if elected, the party would change the maximum mortgage term, increasing it from 25 years to allow up to a 30-year mortgage. It is also promising to review the stress test for first-time buyers applying for a mortgage. Housing cost. The reality is that finding affordable housing is increasingly difficult in many parts of Canada. The smallest provincial capital, Charlottetown, is one of the lowest rental vacancy rates in the country. It hovers just above 0%. New Kijiji listings last just minutes before apartments are snapped up, and renters complain about spending ever more of their limited dollars on housing. It's an old axiom of financial planners that renters should never spend more than 30% of their gross earnings on rent and utilities. In Charlottetown, low-income renters, those earning less than $21,361, spend on average 62% of their earnings on housing. That's double what's recommended. Wild, right? The numbers get only marginally better when income levels increase. That means it's still very expensive when you increase the income levels. Back to the article. Data gathered by the Canadian Rental Housing Index shows that Toronto renters earning as much as $45,498 a year are dedicating 40% of their earnings to monthly housing costs. Live outside the downtown core in York or Peel region, and those middle-income earners are paying an average of 44% and 38% respectively. In Regina, low-income renters spend more than half their pre-tax earnings on rent and utilities. In Calgary, it's 62% and 91% in Vancouver. This may help to explain why so many adult children are returning to live with their parents even after they've entered the workforce, or why many young adults choose to have roommates to defray living costs. Across Canada, it's not simply a question of how much accommodation costs, but about keeping up with the need for more places to live. In 2018, there were 37,000 new apartments built nationwide, but demand increased by 50,000 units, according to tracking done by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC. Canadian cities continue to grow, driven by factors such as immigration and strong job numbers. With housing-related problems rising and the cost of living a primary issue for Canadian voters, Charlottetown Mayor Philip Brown figures political party leaders in the midst of a federal election campaign should be talking more about it. When he was elected last year, he described how he used a congratulatory phone call from the Prime Minister to drive home his top priority. Quote, "We have a problem with affordable and accessible housing," Brown said. He told Justin Trudeau on a call shortly after his election as mayor in November 2018. "We need more public spending from the provincial and federal governments to up the supply of affordable and accessible housing." Each community has its own housing challenges, and one of the big ones for Charlottetown is the short-term rentals for the city's giant tourism industry suck up a lot of housing stock. Another is housing prices. Canadian Real Estate Association, CREA, data show they've jumped 38.5% in the past 3 years alone in PEI's capital. I just want to say that again. 38.5% in the last 3 years alone. That's 10%, more than 10% growth per year. That is incredible. Incredible. And I'll show you, money laundering is inflating housing prices across Canada. Money laundering that is being allowed. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Being allowed simply because there's no mechanism in Canada to properly prosecute these people. The cases keep falling apart. It's incredible. And I've done lots of reports on this. It's wild. It's wild. By comparison, back to the article, prices rose 25.3% in Toronto, 21.6% in Ottawa, and 33.3% in Victoria. A market where buyers get into bidding wars is new for Canada's smallest province, which recently surpassed 153,000 residents, and it's persuading some landlords to sell. Added to that, the province's population is growing, with people moving to PEI from other nations and parts of Canada on both a permanent and temporary basis. The University of PEI hasn't built a new residence in 14 years, for example, while its student population has increased by about a third. There have been significant increases in the number of students on campus requiring housing, with half now coming from out of province or out of country. And that, in turn, is pushing more demand on downtown housing, Brown explains. Holland College student Sierra Eccleton was debating whether she could afford to stay in school after she was evicted by her landlord because the building was not up to code. She managed to find a new apartment but for nearly double the monthly rent. "Realistically, I don't want to pay that, but it looks like I'm going to have to," said Eccleton. "The cost of living is way too high considering it's such a small city." She's not alone. A global survey by money manager BlackRock Inc. found, quote, "Many Canadians feel that they're in a financial squeeze, hard-pressed to save amid what they perceive as a high cost of living, including devoting much of their income to paying for their homes." Canadians who responded to the poll said they spend an average of 43% of their income on housing, whether renting or owning. Among the 20 countries surveyed, only the Netherlands and Sweden had higher housing costs at 51% and 45% respectively. Charlottetown's mayor was well aware of the numbers. In his community, he's most focused on trying to help the people who find themselves paying more than they can afford and those who can't find anything at all. "We may be a small city," he says, "but we've got big city problems." The mayor says he would like to hear commitments from party leaders this election cycle to use big federal wallets to help cities build more affordable housing. I've got two calls this past week and one visit to the office," Brown said, from a woman who was living in her car in the Walmart parking lot and another woman that's been in a shelter now for almost a month and she needs a place to live. So I find it very, very concerning that we are looking at a deficiency of at least 12,000 units, according to this, for apartments for places to live in 2018. And in the face of that, we're talking about increasing immigration. Because what that does is it snaps up the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments and it reduces the inventory. A reduced inventory leads to landlords increasing rent and finding creative ways to get people out of their apartments or houses, right? Oh, we're renovating. Sorry, we're changing the whole look. Gotta go. Sorry about your luck. I'm sorry. It's just happening now, right? Just bought the place. Gotta go. And there's no legal mechanism that can stop this, but we can look at making sure that we don't have an immigration policy that's outpacing the ability of our municipalities and our cities to absorb the growth. And at this point, people are immigrating to Canada. We have immigrant class and refugee class people who are homeless. That is unbelievably irresponsible of the Canadian government. That is shameful. That is unbelievable that we have that happening in our country. People who should be taken care of, coming here for opportunity and find there's nowhere to live and no help, and they end up homeless. That is unbelievable, and it is a side effect of bad governance because the government should be making our programs function properly, not being completely overwhelmed. There is a point where you have to say, this is as much as we can afford, period. And we've passed that point. And the government is acting irresponsibly by not managing our systems responsibly. Thanks for watching, everybody. Voting day is October 21st. I've got 1 or 2 more videos coming right up. So, well, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.